Well met. This has been Brode, and you're watching Born to be
Cosmo.
Oh, snap.
Welcome to Born to be Cosmo, the podcast where we talk about all things Marvel Snap. And ZombiesGoNomNom, NateWolfeTCG,
Yo.
my two dependable co-hosts who join me, I have a message for you both. It has never been a better time to play Marvel Snap than right now if you're in China. Now, a little context around the snark, and it's snark. KM Best, who's a wonderful content creator that if you don't know who they are, then, well, you should go look them up on Twitter, as I refuse to call it by its now legal name. Does a lot of good content, and one of the content that they do is their hot takes, where basically people provide KM Best their hot takes as it relates to the card game Snap, and the best or funniest ones get compiled in a video, which frankly is a pretty fun watch. And our very own ZombiesGoNomNom has been a frequent contributor. You've made the video a fair number of times. Yeah, more than once. You had a hot take, although it was less of a hot take and it was more of a PSA, and I don't want to steal your thunder, so why don't you share with our viewers and listeners what it was that you shared with KM and the internet writ large?
Sure, yeah. So I was saying if regular Snap players could see how many more events and cool things the Chinese version of Snap has than we do, they'd be kind of pissed. And one of those things is even letting players rent a deck for a week. And this is all like super recent information. Like the timing was kind of good because he posted the hot takes thing like a day or two after I saw this stuff for the first time, and a lot of people responded to it who clearly hadn't heard of this either. And the only reason I heard of it was because of a good high ladder player got a chance to play in a Team China tournament. And so they were streaming it and they were showing off some of the things in the client and what's different. And because Snap in China is a new thing. It launched like 6 months ago or something. It hasn't been around for nearly as long as the game we have had. And so it's interesting.
And it's not like when a live service game gets launched in China, like alongside the other regions, like for example, say Hearthstone. Like this is a completely different, like, the cards that have released here haven't necessarily released there, and they do different things, and it's
like on balance is one of the biggest.
Yeah, it's like its own separate live service instance.
Yeah, like you can't be hopping over to the China Snap server. They have different cards. Like I believe they're just about to release Scar as the season pass card. They're doing it in a bit of a different order. Like Werewolf by Night was in Deadpool's Diner as the card reward. A bunch of the cards that have been a bit more problematic on our side that have gotten nerfed haven't been changed yet. Some examples include Hela doesn't have the minus power restriction. Leech, Dr. Octopus, everyone's favorite gang of baddies. You have 2-0 Angela. It's original Sandman. It's quite interesting to see. A lot of these changes that came to the game. It happened over such a long period of time. It's easy to kind of forget about them. But in watching some of the tournament gameplay that showed me that client, it made me very appreciative of how far our Snap has come in terms of balance. Because watching someone play Bounce versus Hela Sandman, it made me physically ill. Like I do not miss a lot of it has 5/7 Annihilus that can send over 0 power cards, and so it's interesting. And it seems like they're trying to release things, I think, at a bit of a faster pace, because I think their goal eventually is to get more on parity with where we are. Like they don't want to forever be behind global Snap. So I
Mhm.
think they're releasing at a bit of a faster pace. I don't know all the details. Like, I've only looked into it on the surface level, and Scott from SnapFan did a little bit of a breakdown dive into it. So shout out to them because he had some good information on it. And yeah, it was quite interesting to see. One of the biggest things that I think a lot of people have been talking about is the tournament stuff. So there
Yeah.
are in-game cash tournaments with large cash prizes.
At large is how large?
So I don't know the exact conversion, but what I was seeing from Discord, I think the peak of it was like in the 20 grand range. So like pretty substantial. And like these are massive tournaments. Like they're talking about 10,000 players making the cut for day 2 or whatever. And so it's pretty different. But I think that's like a very big cultural difference thing where in the West, it's not even really exclusive to card games, but card games have got it pretty bad. The whole esports thing has really petered out, and I think a lot of the people who invested money in it realized that it's like trying to get blood out of a stone. Like there's not it's like really hard to make profit off of an esports scene. It's like you get some advertising, sure, but I think and we've seen like Hearthstone and Snap and Pokemon Pocket. We've seen an emphasis on moving away from that competitive scene. It feels like they're letting physical card games do that kind of stuff more with like Magic or some of the other new ones like Flesh and Blood and One Piece. Those games have more thriving competitive scenes in physical paper games, but it seems like card games are at least in the US and the EU and elsewhere markets outside of China, they're going more in the casual direction because why spend all that money and time and effort trying to like make this competitive scene when you could do better as a game and financially just by making like a more casual experience that is more open to. I mean, that's kind of the premise Snap has succeeded off of, in my opinion. Like they never really aimed for it to be this super competitive thing. So it's kind of interesting to see in China where that is more of a I don't know how successful esports are in China, but I know they're a lot more successful than they are here. And there's a lot more like player interest relatively. So and I mean I think NetEase does this for a lot of games. NetEase is a big company. And so they probably I don't know. There are a lot of differences there. So I'm not super like surprised or mad about this because like I think that's just kind of the reality of the industry at this point.
Mhm.
And apparently I guess there's some way to compete in it without actually being from there or something. I don't know the details on that. So if you're really, really driven and want to compete in cash tournaments, maybe you can find a way to finagle that and get into the Chinese Snap client or something. I don't know. But that was one of the major things that stuck out to a lot of people because we've had a lot of the more like high level competitive players have quit in recent months. It's been a very noticeable thing on high end ladder. Just a lot of the best names aren't around anymore. The quality of play is lower. It's I've heard like nothing but that from a lot of other good players whose opinions I respect. And I've felt it myself. So I think that's one of the side effects of like seeing global Snap not really embrace any kind of competitive thing, even if it was very small compared to heck the apparently you even get a different like title reward for placing top 10 on ladder and top 1 gets like a rainbow title or something. Like even something
Huh.
that small, it's like I think even though it's next to meaningless, I think even something that small would have given a bit of incentive for like helping some of the more competitively minded people to stick around because like I don't really try and grind the leaderboard that much anymore. I just play the game when I feel like playing the game, but it's I think a lot of people just felt like they were just going through the motions and there was no point. And especially like some of the best people, once you hit rank 1, like you did it, you beat Marvel Snap. You could do that again, but like what's the point other than bragging rights or trying to sell 8 cubes for $50 or whatever, 80 cubes for $50 or whatever the whole cheating scandal thing was. Um, but
That hot
there's just
Oh And what a callback to the last episode, the last two episodes.
Yeah,
That's
it's
good.
just
I forgot about that.
it's just kind of funny, but it's interesting to see like how they have it's not like the exact same, but it's very close to like metas we used to have. And in watching some of that, it really made me appreciate that. And it's really kind of a shame because if you've listened to the podcast for a long time, you'd know that through a lot of Snap's life, like balance was really not the greatest. like I think 2023 was really really bad on balance for most of its life. And then 24 I think got a little bit of a rocky start, but progressively got so much better, and especially in the last few months it's been like good. The balance has gotten so much better. The season pass cards aren't breaking the game in half. There are a lot of different archetypes that exist and thrive. There hasn't really been this S tier dominant deck. Like it's just they've gotten a lot better at their job, it feels like. And it's a shame that's coinciding with a lot of people feeling burnt out and that they can't keep up with the game economy and can't take a break and all this stuff. And it's just unfortunate because like the actual game itself feels like it's not in a bad place in terms of gameplay, but all the other stuff surrounding it has really put a lot of people off Snap. And so a lot of people I think are treating it like they're in maintenance mode with Snap, where either they've taken a break and they're waiting to see what Second Dinner does, or they're still logging in and doing their dailies but they're playing a bit less. And I think it's really everyone's just hinging on waiting for that. Like, all right, here's the card acquisition update, guys. And I think that's going to be the make or break moment for a lot of the more invested players, whether they stick with the game or maybe come back to it or whatever. And or not.
What did you think of that hot take that like I won't let it bug me because it's something that we'll never have, and so I'm just not going to think about it. Like that's crazy, man. So now you know about it. Like
I mean, like I get it from a sense of like
that's
the grass is always greener.
I
And
guess,
like,
but that's
you don't want to focus on it. But at the same time, it's like I think it's fine to hold that opinion for yourself, but I think it's less fine to like expect other people to hold that opinion.
Yeah.
Right.
But like, say your brother gets a BMW, right?
Mhm.
Is it not right? Is it not
You
like
get a little
plausible to be
beater.
like, and you got like a 81 Toyota Tercel, like
Mhm.
you're not like a little bit jealous? Like, no, I'm just not going to think about it because I'm never going to be able to afford it.
All right. So
I mean, that's a bad analogy, but like
it is, but I think that's missing the point. That's kind of like what one would hyperfixate on. But I find the what annoys me more than they've got things that are better than us or they've got things that are worse. It's the fact that they have a completely different live service than we do. We were talking a little bit about this before the show started, but it is assumed, although not confirmed, that a lot of the differences are through their partnership with NetEase. Again, we've talked about this before, but just as kind of a quick refresher, when one does business in the Chinese market, one has to partner with a Chinese company. In the video game space, this is generally Tencent, or is NetEase Tencent? I can't remember if those are the two, or
Yeah,
there's
I believe so. I think
okay.
they're
And so, it is assumed that NetEase is responsible for a lot of these differences. But here's the thing. All these differences are in the actual game itself, not on the peripheral, meaning that NetEase has either access to the source code and are compiling their own game clients and making server changes themselves, which would take a lot of overhead to teach them how to do this, or they have the use of third-party tools more likely to administer these differences and make these changes themselves. Either way, the overhead to extend the platform to kind of survive in multi instances that are completely like enclosed from one another, that takes a lot of development effort. And so really, I think what to summarize succinctly, what I am annoyed about is that all of this development effort is being used to stand up a different experience when the experience that we have, by Second Dinner's own admission, needs to be improved still needs to be improved. And of course, one can talk about, well, developers that are working on like back-end engineering aren't going to be working on game economy, etc. But I think that at a certain
Well, they
point,
kind of are if they're making a whole new
you're
system, right?
right. But how you choose to how you choose to allocate your budget is a state. Like, I forget who said this. Was it Obama? Someone made a statement once in American politics that a budget is a moral document, and I think that that's really true in a capitalist context, right? How Second Dinner chooses to allocate those resources speaks to their priorities, and I think that, unfortunately, like it or not, our experience being suboptimal, such as it was, they're trying to apply lessons learned as they extend to a very important market in China, which I understand is the game is a success over there, although it's not without player complaints and problems that are similar to our own. The fact that all of this effort was put into the game base to allow for a completely different experience is what annoys me, regardless of what that experience is better, worse, or different because of the overhead. And so I think that's why I find the whole thing irksome. As for the whole, brother-in-law with a nicer car argument, I'm not actually so sure that they have the nicer car in the Chinese instance.
They definitely do not when it comes to playing the game. from what I watched
what it
them
costs.
playing the tournament,
Yeah.
or the cost. From what I've heard, the spotlight system seems very similar. The price of bundles seems very similar. I don't think the game is actually cheaper than it is here. So they're still making that big second dinner, those big second dinner bucks. Which, I mean, fine, that's their prerogative. I can definitely understand why they made this choice a bit, though, because when it comes to just making more money, I think them releasing in China will probably make them hand over fist more money than even if they perfectly nail whatever acquisition changes they do. Like, just because of the raw amount of people over there, and I mean, and I think there is maybe a little bit more interest in the card game genre. I mean, I think about like Wild Hearthstone, right? And how massive the Chinese player base was for that. And when the Chinese servers closed down, we saw a lot of them migrate to the North American and other servers. And so it makes a lot of sense to me why they would do this. But you brought up a very good point in that, like, I don't, myself and many other people, we don't know how making like games and stuff works, but you have more familiarity with like the coding stuff behind some of this stuff, just in general. And it's a good point when you compare it to something like Hearthstone, where Hearthstone had a China client too, but it wasn't unique from the main game. It was the same client. It was, I mean, I think there was one or two small different things, like something I think with the packs was different because of how China handles like pack opening laws and rules and stuff. But it was very minor stuff. It was like, whereas in this, it's like it's on a whole different version of the game, and they have. I think one of the things that was really interesting that hasn't been covered a whole ton, and I do need to look more into, is they have a bunch of these like little mini events in game. And I don't really know too much about them. I need to like look into it a bit more. But it was really interesting to see that, because like mainly the only things we've had for events in Snap were like the new limited time modes, right? Diner and high voltage. But we haven't had, and now, and maybe we'll talk about this later, we have that new little, I don't even know if you guys have seen about this, the little collectors event thing going
yeah,
on.
but man, it was not advertised well. I almost
No,
missed it. And
it's a second dinner. Of course, it's not advertised well. Like, that's why you go to youtube.com/ZombiesGoNomNom and get all your Snap news for that. Second dinner just doesn't even bother to tweet out, apparently. I mean,
what's the event called?
So let's see, it's collectors something. I posted it here. Let's see. It is
the collector's chest.
Collector's Cash event. Yeah. And if you haven't heard about that, it's just if you go into the game, you can go into like your little news section or the message section, click on this little collector's thing, and lets you open a box once a day. And in that box can be a variety of things from boosters to credits to variants. And the super special 1% thing is a exclusive Black Panther variant. And if you open 10 of the boxes, you get that guaranteed. And these don't cost anything. Like you can't buy more boxes, but if you do want to earn more boxes, every 5 wins you get in a day outside of, I think Proving Grounds is disabled for it, but every other mode and whatnot is enabled for it. If you get 5 wins, I think up to 20 or 30, I'm not sure the max number, but every 5 you get another box. And it's a short time thing. It's only running till the 7th. I've been engaging with it a little bit. It's kind of neat. I mean, it's nothing like special or anything like that, but it is something like I would like to see more of, because as someone who like, gets the infinite climb done on the first or second day, kind of chills pretty high infinite, doesn't play a lot of conquest. I run out of things to do in the game pretty often outside of like, oh, I'll toy around with the new card most of the time when it comes out, but there's not a whole lot to do in Marvel Snap if you're not chasing the ladder or grinding conquest tickets and stuff. Like there's not much to chase. So this gives you a little bit more of an incentive to play some more games, and you might get some bonus rewards. I haven't had much luck with it in terms of like getting good stuff out of it. I've mostly gotten boosters and 50 credits, but there are some nice rewards in there, like 500 credits, premium mystery variant, regular mystery variant, and I do really appreciate that they made the exclusive variant a guaranteed thing. You will have to play a bit for it because I think you need to open like 10 chests or something to get it. But they could have very easily just been like, no, this is a 1% thing, and if you don't get it, you don't get it. But if you feel like playing a good bit of Marvel Snap, it shouldn't be very hard to get this. But if you're just hearing about it, you might want to get the grind on because it's only going until the 7th.
But by the way, just to revisit something I said, it wasn't Barack Obama that said a budget is a moral document. It was Martin Luther King Jr., apparently. I should have probably Googled that before I said it. So I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledge that error on my part. That said, it doesn't change my opinion on the matter that where one chooses to expend their resources speaks to their priorities. And yeah.
I wonder if they'll be as delayed on the economy rework as we were.
Well, considering
Probably
they
not.
can rent full decks.
Well, so the rent deck thing is kind of funny because like it sounds like a good thing, and I think it is a good thing, but also looking at some of the quality of those decks, it wasn't the greatest. Like there was like
Were
a
they like bot
destroy deck.
decks?
Well, no, there was like a destroy deck, but instead of being built like a fully destroy deck, it also had Yondu and Phoenix Force for some reason, but also did the null stuff. And they seemed like suboptimal decks. I don't know if that's because they were just designed that way, or maybe those decks were more popular on that server. Because it did say you can rent one of these popular decks or something. So maybe it's just like we all remember from Wild Hearthstone, like sometimes the China decks would just be different.
True.
Right.
I also remember though when Hearthstone, I know this is different, but when they were like selling decks, like you could buy a pre-made deck, that they had some weird card choices in there too.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't think you can actually. It's a trial, but I don't think you can actually like buy the deck.
Yeah, no.
It just
sounds
gives
like a
you a
rental,
deck to
but
rent for a week, and you got to pick one. And it's just funny because I've gotten that suggestion in my comments so many times, like, "Oh, if only they give us a trial period for the new card," which I doubt they'll ever do, or like just even the rental deck idea, like giving someone a chance to try out an archetype that they might be interested in before they go spending a bunch of tokens on getting these cards they need for it, I think could go a long way. And I was always in the mindset of, oh, that's something Second Dinner would never do. And I still think that. It's just funny to see that on this different version of the game run by NetEase or Tencent or whoever's running it. It's just funny to see that they are doing some of these things that I just don't think we'll ever see on international Snap.
Right.
And they know how to. I guess I do want to get my facts straight here. Let's see. Marvel Snap China release partner. I want to make sure. So it is NetEase, and I believe, yeah. So NetEase is also who's doing Rivals, right? NetEase
Oh,
Games. So
interesting.
it's just funny to see because like Rivals has kind of taken the. I mean, how the whole season this season was a crossover with Rivals, right? And Rivals has kind of taken. I'm not even playing a whole lot of it, but Rivals has taken the hero shooter genre by storm because it's doing a lot of things that some of the other big players really didn't capitalize on well. Like it's fully free to play. They have all the characters. It's monetized purely through cosmetics. Their new season's about to launch, and they're launching not one but 4 different characters in this season. When it took like Overwatch like a year for a character or something ridiculous. When that's like the big behemoth Activision Blizzard, and so it's funny to see like that this company, who I think generally a lot of people, especially in the West, have had a more negative view of NetEase because they're often involved with a lot of these gotcha games and stuff like that that a lot of people don't really like. But it's funny to see them like absolutely just like clean the clock of all these like big Western game developers on this one genre, and they're not. I mean, they're clearly doing interesting stuff in Snap too, for the Chinese variant of it. So it's quite interesting to see the different choices made there, and the fact this is even like a thing at all. And I'm curious to see how it develops over time and whatnot. And from what I've read a little bit, a lot of players, I don't know how many, but a lot of there were a lot of players in China who played on the international version of the game through like VPN or whatever other means, and then they eventually switched over to the China version. But it's like it's not like they didn't know that our version didn't exist or stuff like that.
Right. Well, yeah, and I think that you also mentioned that they had Deadpool's diner there, and that was not
Deadpool's restaurant.
Deadpool's restaurant, the literal translation, and it was received about as well there as
Yeah,
it
like
was
there were
here.
similar complaints, so it's like it's not a case of as much of like, oh, their version of the game is so much better because like I don't think it really is that much better. It just has some stuff I would have liked to see them do here.
Yeah.
But it's also a trade-off of they also have way, way worse balance right now. And personally, if I have to choose between really bad game balance and a few extra little like small event stuff and some tournament stuff, I'm gonna choose the game balance, to be honest. Not that you should have to choose between those two things, but I really think it I think it's a little taken for granted looking at like Snap where it is now with balance and where it was for so much of its life in the past. Because I mean, you guys remember so often our show would be talking about the new OP thing that is like defining the metagame. And don't get me wrong, there've been some OP things this year, and not even that far back. Like Surtur was a bit OP, Agent Venom was a bit OP, right? But like comparatively to a lot of the things before them, it wasn't as crazy. And they also got dealt with in a faster fashion, and they didn't completely nuke those cards. They're still relevant, they're still playable, but they're not like they're not like dominating to the level that they were. The balance has just gotten a lot better in the game. They've gotten a lot better at releasing cards that make an impact that aren't like overly defining the meta in a way that's not enjoyable. And yeah, if you're looking for some positivity, I think that is one of the best things Snap has going for it right now. Is the balance has been significantly better this like the last few months going into like the new year. I think even for a lot of 24 outside of like the initial, I don't know. Whenever Thanos got like the axe after Thanos finally got nerfed for like the 30th time and became Quicksilver, suddenly things started to get better on balance. And then they were even able to bring him back, and they brought Zabu back, and the new card releases I think have been done generally very well. I mean, it's not perfect. And they have definitely nuked some cards like White Widow. Like that is a shame to see. So it's far from perfection, but remembering the days of old Snap, it's a night and day difference because I find myself focused on the thing I'm annoyed with about Snap is the economy stuff and what it's doing to the player base more than like oh, they really need to buff this or nerf this. Like that's become a much more background thing for me than it used to be. It used to be that was the thing we were complaining about a lot before acquisition stuff.
Yeah, I still am annoyed that the thing exists. That's it. I don't like that it exists at all. And I think it's just something that we're just going to have to accept, keep our eye on, and hopefully try and provide respectful and valid feedback if
Well, if you
those
think this is bad,
differences.
you just wait till they come out with their match 3 game that they're using Snap's profits to fund.
Well, I don't know anything about that, but I mean, if it's like, what if it's a Pokemon Match 3 game? Then who's going to be laughing last?
Well, I mean, it's just like Candy Crush type stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
I mean, it could be. Although I imagine it's going to be Marvel IP again. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Second Dinner's been working on another game for some unknown amount of time. There's really not much information about it, other than it. From what I heard, it sounded like it was going to be a match 3 game. That might not still be the case. I don't really know. It's not super out there information, but there's no doubt in my mind, like some portion of their resources are going from Marvel Snap, or like that they've made off of making Marvel Snap, are going towards. They're not all in on Snap. They're gonna make another
Yeah,
game.
they're all in on Marvel Snap, and they're all in on Marvel CN Snap and Match 3 new project, and on it goes, right?
All I know is there it would be a pretty large sum of dollars to get me to sign up to another Second Dinner game after the roller coaster of Marvel Snap. They know how to make a good game, but all this stuff that comes with it, it's like, no, I'm good
We
on that again. Like I'll stick
we
with
say
this.
this as we're signing on to a DNA game, so I mean,
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
always room for disappointment.
that's true. It's mobile gaming in a nutshell, right? It's kind of the industry.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, kind of just I don't know if you guys have any final thoughts on this kind of pretty revelatory thing that you brought to our attention, zombies, and I have to admit I didn't know about this until I saw your take on Twitter as well. But yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about high voltage, but just wanted to see if you had any other points with respect
Not
to this.
really. I think that's about it. Like, I'm gonna try and look into it a little more, and I might give it its own little dedicated video breakdown because I think there's some interest there. But yeah, I don't know. It's not something that surprised me, and like when I initially saw the stuff, I was like, oh man, I wish we got some of this. But like the more I've seen of it, it's like it's not as much as I initially thought it was in terms of them like doing different stuff. But
Mm,
I really wish they would do some of that stuff or try more stuff like that on the, main server that they built their company off of. Doesn't feel like too high of an ask. Like it's felt like for a while. I mean, there's a very common community consensus of like the online engaged player base that like it feels like Second Dinner drags their feet to do anything that is not just like new card release. Like
yeah.
think how long it took us to get our first new mode. It took what, like a year and a half or something. I mean, I guess a year after Conquest maybe. It took a long time. And like people want something like to freshen the game up, the economy rework. It has been not great, right? And how long it's taken, and it's still going to take longer. And so it's just like I think that definitely adds to a bit of frustration there, where it's like, well, now we might have at least a little bit of an idea of why it's taking so much longer, is because they're working on launching it in China, where they can probably make way more money off of doing that
With
than
a
they can off of
yeah.
rejuicing the 2-year-old game. Right?
Yeah, they're selling it in China, and they're offering a completely different user experience as a result. So high voltage, yeah, better than Deadpool's diner or restaurant,
Sure,
as I
sure.
like to call it now. Yeah, I'm curious. Did you guys get all the rewards from high voltage?
Oh man, I did, but barely. It was the last
Yeah,
morning.
you're snaking it out at the end, right?
This is my screenshot here. I was at 11,800 on the night before, and I was like, dang it. At 20 points per win, I was like, I'm not going to play that many games for 200 wins. Like, forget it. I'll wait
Yeah.
until the next morning. And then, so you could get it if you basically did like all the quests, but you had to do them fairly consistently.
Regularly. Yeah,
Yeah.
like so they were on an 8-hour cycle, right? Unlike the
Yeah.
regular. So in Snap, you get 2 quests every 8 hours for your regular quest, but that gives you like you can hold 6, so you can stockpile them up to a day and you don't miss anything. Uh, this is not like that. This is if you miss those quests every 8 hours, they don't roll over, they don't stockpile. Now they do have a bit of a grace period where it's like you don't need to do all of them to get the card. I think you could miss like the event ran for a week, and I think you could miss like 2 or 3 days out of that week, and as long as you did the rest, you still got there.
Mm,
Grinding it just by like the 20 points a win or whatever, super inefficient. Most people, I imagine, did not go
yeah.
that route. But I do think it played into a little bit some of the burnout people feel, where it's like I don't know. I think a lot of people don't want to feel obligated to open the game every 8 hours. And again, you don't have to do that. You could skip an 8 hour here or there because you don't need them all. One notable change is they swapped the variant and the card. Last time the card was like the second to last reward. This time it was the last reward, so it required a little bit more of you. But
Yeah.
generally, the response to high voltage was very similar to last time, where I think people just like having a casual mode that plays different. They can
And
jam their quests here. It was chill.
yeah,
Um,
no stakes games, 3 rounds. You can do your dailies there also. Like that's all I played. As soon
yeah,
as I hit infinite, and then I just jammed this for the rest of the time it was
I
running.
streamed it a bunch. It's fun. Like
I did get
unlike
tired of
Deadpool's
seeing
Diner,
like,
it's a different way to play the game. Like Diner is just the same game, just the snapping snakes are a little bit different. But like high voltage, like people are playing different decks. They banned Goliath this time, which was kind of funny, but
they could
not
ban Wong next time. That would be nice.
that would be funny. I love how one of the funny
It's
things
like,
out of it
good
has been
grief.
like because they added a new card to the ban list. There's been so many people like requesting different other things to be added to
Black
the
Panther,
yeah.
Zola. All right.
It's all
Cosmo.
yeah. People are like, oh, just ban the card that stops people from comboing or whatever. But
I didn't finish it. I didn't get the reward. I stopped about 3/4 of the way through. It just felt like work, and I had enough. And I saw you starting to brew with the card, and I was like, I'm never gonna use this card, so whatever.
yeah, the card is definitely the main incentive, right? Like that's the big thing to get out of the mode. I think even for the people who are like who were behind on it, I think like economically it made more sense to use gold to refresh the missions than it would to like buy this card for 3k tokens if it was a card that interested you.
Dude, I'll tell you what. I missed King Eitri, and
Mhm.
the game tries to sell it to me every single day. Like,
For
and
you bundle.
and I don't want it. Like, but I wish that I had got it just so that it would get out of there.
Yeah, because it's
Like,
probably like the only Series 4 card you're missing, so
I'm
it's spamming you with those Series 4 bundle
I'm
offers.
missing a couple, but like it's that and like Fastos and like
Yeah,
maybe one other. Or there's a
like
couple,
the
but
bad
like
ones. It's like I don't want this stuff. Stop clogging my shop with it. But Lash is cool. I'll give it a bit of credit in that it's more. I think this card is a step up from Agony and King Eitri. I think both those cards were like they're not the worst cards in the world,
Agony's
but
okay.
Agony got better with this card, even.
That's true. I've seen
Um,
Agony and
they
Destroy,
work
and
together
it's
pretty
okay.
well. It's like Agony and Ichi aren't bad cards, but they just weren't super exciting to me in terms of what they were adding to the game.
Yeah.
Agony got a little more exciting over time, like with the addition of Penny Parker, has some synergy there. It has some synergy with Lasher, Nomura stuff. So like that card's gotten a little bit better with time. But when they both released, even if you're tuned into all the Snap content stuff, you didn't see people rushing out to brew Eitri and Agony decks. Like it just the cards weren't that
It's no Cassandra
impactful.
Nova. Yeah.
No, not at all. Because Cassandra Nova was like a good card. They took out of the cache to put in the free mode, and the other two were like free like free cards that they made worse.
Right.
Oh, didn't put anything on the hamburger. Thanks.
So yeah, they're not as quality cards, but they're free, so it's not as big of a deal. But this card feels more quality. It's feels a lot more quality. Like it's pretty good. It suffers a bit from all the Luke Cage in the metagame, but I've been playing a bunch with it in the top 100, and it's working. I have a lot of fun with it. I like this kind of card design. Like I like all the symbiote stuff, and I think this is a cool way to make activate neat. Like I like this as an activate card. Half of the time he was just Red Guardian bait. Like he got Red Guardian a lot in the first week because that's like the most common tech in the game and it shuts him down. But if he's eating the Red Guardian, then your Galacta or your other Thena or whatever else doesn't get hit by Red Guardian.
Yep.
So, he's a little bit of a shield for that, but he can be a lot of power sometimes. Like I've had games where I get an 8 power or higher Lasher, and all of a sudden that's like a 16-point swing in a lane, and that's kind of awesome. Like just put in all this negative power, and it's fun. I hope this is a sign of things to come in the future, of much like how balance got better over time. I hope they find like a better space for these free cards, because I think it's clear they don't want the free cards to be as sought after as the ones people are paying keys for. But this is a lot closer to that. Like this is a lot closer to me. This is a lot closer to Cassandra Nova than it is to E-Tree or Agony, even if it's still like Cassandra Nova is a ways away. It feels like a more interesting design. There's more homes for it.
Yeah.
I personally have had more fun with it. Like it's just I like it, and I'm happy this was the high voltage thing. And I was wondering if we were going to get a new limited time mode or not a new mode, but I was wondering if we were going to get another Deadpool's Diner rerun for January. But that was not in their little trailer. So I think we're gonna
No,
have
didn't they say that they were gonna not do Deadpool's Diner again until they retool it, or am I dreaming that?
I think they said something like that because they were like, yeah,
I would have to check.
They did say like we heard your feedback and.
Maybe it was just another. Maybe it was implied. I don't know. So,
I think they talked about hearing the feedback of like people were mad about the diner because like they were like, hey, it's Deadpool's Diner 2.0, and then it didn't change anything. And so I think they've said some things about that after the fact.
Okay,
like,
but no,
all right,
but no.
Yeah, we hear you, but
yeah,
I don't think we've got any concrete information on the future of Deadpool's Diner other than like, hey, yeah, we're listening to what you guys have said about the diner, and hopefully that'll lead to some actual improvements. Because I mean, that's what many of us wanted from it for the first time, and that's what we were hoping when they put in Diner 2.0. That'd be more than just a rerun, and it was just a rerun, and
right.
that upset
Yeah, I mean, I guess they want to focus on their revamped whatever changes they're making to improve card acquisition beyond the increase to 2,000 tokens.
For sure. Like
of course,
that's a much more important thing to focus on. So hopefully they can figure it out, because it's always weird and different in online game spaces, because you get the whole like the game is dying narrative and stuff, and it generally comes from a place of people wanting the game to like be better and meet their expectations and improve. But we've said many times, like on the show here, like all the online card gamers, I think, could like Thanos snap out of existence. The game would probably still be pretty successful off the casuals, but we are seeing cracks in the casual base too, going off of like Twitch drop stuff that usually brings in the casuals. Those numbers are way down. So it's hard to know just how much the casual player base is or isn't resonating with the direction the game is going. But I think the fact that we got, this upcoming Band-Aid solution of speeding up Series 3 and 2K tokens in the mystery slot, I think that shows like they knew they needed to do something to kind of stop the bleeding of the people who are leaving. Like that was never going to be enough to bring people back, but it makes the experience a bit less bad for new people, who I think there are more new people who join this game than we realize, because like content and Snap doesn't really work for new players because we're all so far ahead, and there's no catch-up mechanic. So like the new players are just kind of in their own little bubble, and you don't see too many of them online, because I think a lot of them, they'll look up a deck and they'll be like, I can't play any of these decks. Like they'll go look at, let's say, KM's tier list, and they're like, "Oh, I can't play any of these decks because
Yeah, that's me right now, which is funny because I'm missing so many cards. Yeah,
So they like
it's
stay out of the online content space because like it's
yeah.
frustrating to have that happen, right? Like be
You know
told
what?
like these are the decks and I just can't play them.
Here's the thing that I've realized though, and this could be just this month, so we'll see if this is a continuing trend. But because I don't have the cards, I've kind of been doing my own thing, playing old decks or whatever, and it's working well enough that I'm still able to maintain a reasonably, like, I won't say a great rank, but close to what would be considered, or close to what Untapped has called the top 10%.
And it's enjoyable, right? Like you've had fun playing the werewolf deck, and it's like
Yeah.
that didn't used to. I think that speaks to the game balance stuff I was talking about. Because if you tried to do that in 2023 Snap or even early 24, I think you would have a much harder time doing that because the gap between like the best deck and everything else was wider, and now it feels narrower. So it's like
Oh wow. Yeah.
even though werewolf isn't super popular anymore, it's still a perfectly playable deck, and you can beat some of the popular meta decks with it. And I think that
According
applies to a
to
lot of stuff.
according to Untapped, top 10%'s 8,200. Rank 8,200 and below, not snap points, but rank. So like there's still quite a few infinites. We're still looking at 80,000. Keeping in mind that's for all non-China regions combined.
I do wonder what the Chinese player base numbers look like, because if Hearthstone was anything to go by, there were so many people who played on the Chinese Hearthstone servers. I wonder what that looks like in Snap. It
Yeah,
seems big going off the numbers they use for their competition for the tournament stuff, but who knows?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I've been playing a jank list that's basically just a bunch of Bouse cards with Monkey and Werewolf by Night and Sage. And actually, you know what? Gnome, who kind of quit and then just came back late
Yeah, he
this
took a
month,
break because he
late
was
last
doing
month
like
on a
other
whim.
stuff.
He basically played 11 of the 12 cards that I've been
He dropped
playing.
werewolf though, right? And that made me so sad because
Oh, did he
like
drop werewolf?
I'm
I thought I
pretty
saw
sure.
werewolf. Oh, yeah. Let me
I
see.
think your
Maybe I
brain
was
just
mistaken.
auto-filled it in because
You
I
could be
looked
right.
because I saw Gnome's a really great player. He
Oh
used to
yeah,
stream quite a
he's running
bit.
Shadow King instead of werewolf.
Yeah,
Yeah, he totally.
he's the
Yeah,
bounce
no.
guy. I played against him in one of
Yeah,
the community event things. Like really, really nice dude, really good player, really good bounce player. And he
yeah,
always played a lot of the werewolf deck. And so when I saw he posted, "Oh, I came back. These are the decks I played." And I saw the bounce deck, and it was basically bounce werewolf without werewolf. And I was just like, "Oh man, that's how you know
yeah.
it's so like
I
not even that werewolf
totally.
bad. It's just like
Yeah.
when if
Well,
Gnome's not playing werewolf, it's like that's rough,
yeah.
man, because that he loves werewolf, and he was like one of
Of
the better
the
werewolf people.
yeah of the scalars, Sage, Hitmonkey, and Werewolf, I would probably go as far to say that Werewolf is by far the worst one.
It's also
Sage
the
and
most punishing too. Like there's so much room to mess up with the wolf.
Sage and Monkey are also really good at getting bounced by other cards like Toxin and Beast. So like that, like honestly, like just kind of as a side rant, like man, I missed Toxin when it came out, and I paid 6,000 tokens for it when I came back. And
Ouch.
let me tell you that Toxin is by far the most ridiculous bounce card. Like it's insane. It makes the deck so much easier to play than it used to be. Um, and like you can like bounce Sage and Toxin and like do it again, and like if you get them off twice, you're basically winning the match. All that just to say, I've been running it with Wolf, and like I'm not like nearly as good as Gnome, but like I've been hovering around, the 8,000, 7,000, 8,000 range with it. So I think that's whatever. It's good enough. Good enough that I'll queue into a bunch of bots if I decide to play next month, and that's kind of like an if. I'm thinking of taking another month off, because January is not because I have anything against the game. I just circumstance and boredom kind of made me skip the rest of high voltage. But I'm kind of like, yeah, maybe I won't take it off. I don't know. It feels like losing all out on the resources is so punishing. And I don't know if I could like survive another couple months off. I had a war chest of tokens that I was able to come back to, and I don't have that this time. I have
Even mine is almost gone. I've been using
ha-
tokens exclusively for a while. I'm
yeah.
waiting for the update to hit to use the caches so you get better things from the random slot, and my tokens are looking low.
Yeah, I
a
have none.
whopping I have a whopping 1,000. Yeah.
Dude,
I wonder.
I spent all my tokens trying to get the Doom 2099 Spotlight cache variant.
No, really.
I spent
Like you bought the card with tokens and then opened the caches with keys. Is that what you did?
No, I don't have any tokens, so I got it with keys. But
I
then I
see.
was
That gets
like,
You used up your
expensive.
keys, you mean?
yeah, but I spent 6 keys and I still didn't get
Ooh.
it.
Oh God,
So
dude, that's
irritated,
so
and
bad.
it was like my keys are just gone. So, but I mean, I love the card, so whatever. It'll show up.
I've stopped going for
later.
Spotlight variants almost entirely.
It's not worth.
If I like
it.
one, it might influence me using keys that week over using tokens on like the new card, but I don't go for like a Spotlight variant of new cards anymore. It's just I've cut back spending on the game, and it's just prohibitively expensive to chase those. Like it's just, and truthfully, the art hasn't like pushed me in that direction either. I wasn't really into the Spotlights this month. Like I liked the base art. I liked all the variants that came out for the characters outside of Spotlights. So and it's worked out because now I've been using tokens and saving caches, and even though I'm running low on tokens, I have a big war chest of caches that is going to be how I'm keeping up with snap cards for the foreseeable future. I think I have like 45 of them or something ridiculous
Wow.
because I just haven't been using them. I've just been using my token pile and waiting for that update to hit. But we are kind of at the end of the season, right? Like what any like closing thoughts on the season of Marvel Rivals X Marvel Snap?
I mean, I think that it was nice that it was a 5-week season over the holidays. I think that was done entirely by fluke, or maybe it wasn't, so that they could take a break. I think they left the game in a reasonable spot balance-wise. It's maybe a little narrower than I'd like, or not narrower, but I just Doom 2099 is a bit of a. It's the best deck. Is it oppressive? No.
I don't think it's the best deck, but it's one of the best decks.
It's
Well,
good.
it gets
It's
pretty,
interesting because like there's like 5 or 6 different versions of
it's
the
all
deck.
like mid-range soup right now. Most of the best
Yeah.
decks are like mid-range stuff or the occasional or like move bounce or mid-range
Yeah,
stuff or stuff that goes really tall are
move
the best
bounce
things.
on paper is the best deck, but like
Only if
just
you're in like the top 100.
yeah,
Although it is
but
creeping up. It is creeping up across the larger player base. All the high elo players are calling it the new Loki because like it does disproportionately well at high ranks. I don't think there's ever been a new Loki in terms of I think that's a fair comparison because like the trend is the same, but the numbers aren't even close. Like it's people were really, really bad at playing old Loki after like its very first nerf or whatever.
yeah, when you look at move bounce on Untapped, when you get out of the top 10%, it
Probably
like
goes down quite a bit, right?
yeah, it goes way down. It's still positive, but it's just
Yeah,
hovering
so
more
it's
around
still
the
positive.
50% win
If I
rate.
recall correctly, Loki more often than not was not positive for most of its life outside of the top 10%.
I don't know. I stopped looking when it came to Loki. I stopped paying attention because like the builds were all over the place, and I just couldn't stop winning when I would play it.
It required more of the like people talk a lot about how move bounce is a high skill cap, and I think it's honestly overrated how high that skill cap is. Truthfully, it's not that hard to realize you need to move your vulture twice and your dagger twice, and maybe you'll copy it with Frigga or whatever. It's really like
Yeah,
you
it's the
spend an
easiest move
afternoon
there
losing with that
was.
deck and like getting a
Yeah.
feel for it, and then it's really not that hard. I would say it's 5 times easier than Werewolf Bounce, truthfully, because you aren't as punished by misplays as Werewolf Bounce is.
It scales harder. Vulture
It's huge
is
numbers.
like,
It's
yeah,
massive
Vulture and
numbers. It's hard
Torch
to
and
interact with
Dagger.
because they throw priority. It really feels like to me a lot like the old bounce with Hitmonkey felt way back when, where it's just like, all right, they have really absurd numbers and they throw prio, so they make it hard to interact with.
Well, I would try playing it, except I don't own Arana and I don't own Frigga. So Frigga that, I'm gonna just play the
Yeah.
werewolf and monkey.
And that's fine. But like, yeah, Doom definitely has had a big impact on the meta. I think that prediction lined up. Like most of us thought Doom would be the big card of the season. I think that's generally been true. And then Galacta also lived up to the hype. I really liked Galacta as a season pass card.
That card is very good, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon, for sure.
No, it's great. And I really Surtur bored me to tears because it was like 1.5 decks that were actually interested in playing that card, and they were very linear and not that interesting to me. Whereas Galacta has had so many different potential use cases and synergies and different homes you can try it in. So I've had way more fun with that card than I did Surtur. And even Doom, even though I think the design of Doom is a little silly, I like that. I really like the idea of they wanted to bring Doctor Doom back into the meta, and they found a way to do that with this new card without having to like tool up old Doctor Doom. And I've had a lot of fun playing the card, even though it is kind of like basic. It's Doom playing like old Doctor Doom was one of my favorite cards to play. So now that there's a new card that essentially has synergy with him and it's good enough to make the old Doom viable again, like I'm very pleased with that. And it is very counterable. Like namely US Agent has been really, really strong against it. Like that just almost always auto wins a Doom lane. If they don't have Luke Cage, Red Guardian still really good. So it's like it's changed the meta and it's a big part of it, but it's definitely not without its counters. And then some of the other cards I enjoyed more than I thought I would, like Penny Parker. I wasn't very high on that card, and I ended up enjoying it quite a lot. Rocket and Groot, I think, lived up to my expectations of just being a generic good stuff card, but I had more fun with that than
I'm
I thought I would.
debating pulling it, not because I want it, but because it's just so strong.
It's great. It's a very good, and it fits in like the kind of archetype I like to play, which is these like tempo move decks, like not traditional move, but like the Arrow, the Spider-Man, or the Elsa Kitty stuff, and it's just been cool there. So I've liked that. I think the only real flop this season was Bruce Banner and Tricky Bolt, and I'm glad
God.
it flopped. Like I'm very, and even it, there was an Ask the Team that kind of covered this, and someone was asking why they didn't make it better or something along those lines, and I think basically what Glenn said was like, well, we wanted to be careful with this card because we know this is a kind of effect that more competitive minded players do not like. So even if we made the card better, that wouldn't make them more interested or happier with the card. It's just like a Timmy card. And I mean, it probably could use a little bit of a push up, but I think the better way to do that is just to make High Evo better, not to actually change Bruce Banner as a card. Just
Or
like,
maybe, make that a reward for a high voltage rather than making it a cash, or I don't know. Anyways,
well, I
whatever.
think the cash thing is fine because one of the things a lot of people were happy about is they were like, all right, I finally have a skip week. Because so many of these weeks people have been like reluctant to skip because like the card quality's been good. So
and skipping is such a punish, right?
yeah, I feel like you actually end up wanting the card.
Because they never come back.
If you're not a high Evo enjoyer or the number one Hulk fan, you're really not missing Bruce Banner. I didn't buy Bruce Banner, and I have no plans to.
No.
Like, it's just not. It's not a card for me. It's like Hulkling. It's just. I think even Hulkling had more appeal in this card to me. It's just not. It's not. It's not. Not every card has to be super competitive. It's just that unfortunate reality of when every card is priced the same. There's a natural push for like people to want their quote unquote investment to be worth it. And so it's like if you use your resources on Bruce Week instead of Doom Week, you're probably feeling like you have a bit of clown makeup on right now.
Right.
Which is a shame, but I think they can remedy that a bit by frankly just literally unnerf every nerf to high Evo. I think you could do it. I was more timid about it before with unnerfing the regular Hulk. I'm not anymore. The
Even
power
the
level,
Thing?
yeah. The thing,
Okay, all
Boss,
right.
Hulk, all of it. Unnerf all of it. Like
Hulk. Yeah, I
ongoing
guess.
Hulk grows in the
Yeah.
deck. Like it's just High Evo has been so power crept as an archetype, and it
Yeah.
sucks because it's such a great thing to recommend new players, and you still kind of can recommend it to new players a bit, but like
Right, like better off recommending that than Arshem. They'll learn how to play the fundamentals of the game better with that.
but Arsham will probably make them win more. Even post nerf. Even post nerf. That deck is still Hey, the other thing is at least because we got an Arsham nerf, we didn't get to experience Bruce Banner on 1. That was one of the things I was worried about with the card. Was it becoming an Arsham card and just playing it on Bruce Banner on 1 and you have a big Hulk on turn 2, and that wouldn't have been very fun for the other side of the table. But yeah, please, for the love of God, buff High Evolutionary, because it needs it, man. It's Ajax. The Ajax Affliction deck is just High Evolutionary, but better and more expensive in terms of cards. Like it just does it better with less effort, and it doesn't need something like Magic. And it's just I think enough time has passed to where, at the very least, Thing and Wasp are completely safe in my mind. You could make an argument that the Hulk might be too much, but I think because we're getting out of the holidays and we're getting back to that every 2 weeks OTA cycle, I think they should just be risky with it. And worst case, if it is too good, just re-nerf the Hulk after. It's 2 weeks. Who cares? Like, give High Evo players a little bit of time in the sun. They've been out of it for like a while. So I'd like to see that happen because it's a cool archetype. It's a fun archetype. And it's also probably going to add to the larger discussion of Luke Cage nerfs ? Because man, they're printing so many affliction cards, and it's like Luke Cage just becomes a bigger and bigger silver bullet. And I feel like at some point they're not going to like that Luke Cage counters all of these cards.
Oh
but
God! Please don't make it though. Only this like one lane only. It was.
He was that at one point.
It was so bad though. It was
really bad, and I do think he is limiting their design space a little bit for these affliction cards, and it creates, I think, a bit less fun moments. He's not like overpowered or anything, but on the other point, it's like, well, all these affliction cards have been balanced around Luke Cage existing, so it's like, do we then have to like change a bunch of the affliction cards and make them a little worse? And it's a precarious thing. But one idea I heard that I really liked and I thought was kind of cool was have Luke Cage protect the adjacent lanes.
Oh yeah, that'd be
or the other 2 lanes. So like one lane isn't protected, but he protects the other 2, and then you put the other part of his effect on a card like Colossus. Colossus protects one lane and it can't be moved or destroyed. And you make Colossus not totally garbage and playable
like
card.
actually playable. Wow, I have some good variants
and
that
so
I
that
never
way,
use.
like Affliction has a bit more of an option to where it's like, well, Luke Cage still counters it in most of the lanes, but like you might be able to get one over on them in one lane and then squeak out another one or something.
Or just
that was one of the few ideas I heard I really liked.
Just run Super Scroll.
Oh no.
We got to see what a scroll meta is looking like during Doom Week.
Oh yeah.
It's something.
Oh yeah.
It's always something, man. The card.
Mm-hmm.
It indeed is a card. That is true. Gosh, when it's objectively correct to play that card, good grief.
Yeah, not usually a fan of that personally. It was good in high voltage though. I liked it in high voltage.
Yeah, well, fair enough. Yeah, you know what was an MVP in high voltage before I gave up on it? Professor X. Professor X is like the gladiator of the high voltage arena. Like, just wow.
He was good. I know.
X on 1 and 2 is just
pretty
does
good.
pretty good. So yeah, or you can go play on the China game mode and have what is it, 5-1 unnerfed Professor X.
Yeah, let's see what version of Prof they have. I don't even think they have Cannonball as a card yet.
Oh, that's so funny. I'm pretty sure it's old X, not stats, but
it's 5-3
mechanics.
5-3X.
5-3X. Wow, 5-3. Remember when people called it dead at 5-1? Then it
Yep,
had
and
to
then
get reworked.
Ravona and Hope were like, "Nah, he's good, he's
Yeah.
fine." So yeah, it's definitely interesting. Do we want to talk about the new season card now?
Yeah.
We can do
We
it
got a little
briefly,
bit of time.
sure.
Dark
Yeah.
Avengers season. I didn't really know much about the theme of the season, so I looked it up, and it's kind of neat.
Oh man, the comics were great. I give you the 2-second version.
Mhm.
Norman Osborn, aka Green Goblin, became the president, I think, or maybe he was the head of Shield. I think he was the head of Shield. He was like,
Yeah, he was the head of Shield. I looked up.
right. So he took over for Nick Fury, and then he's the Iron Patriot, basically. Like it's his own Iron Man armor. So that's Norman
he's
Osborn.
in the Iron Patriot.
Oh yeah, that's him.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So, and so he put together his own team of Avengers called the Dark Avengers, and they wore the costumes. I mean, he just called them the Avengers, but the comic series that came out was called the Dark Avengers, and it was basically all the villains but wearing the hero costumes. And so Hawkeye was actually Bullseye.
Bullseye, yeah. There's
Um,
a picture here. Let me see if I can.
Moonstone.
I saw a picture of it. It was super cool.
Moonstone was in it, but she was Miss Marvel. Dakin was in it, but he was Wolverine.
Yep.
God, it was actually great. It was a great series. Mac Gorgon was in it, who was Venom.
Yeah, Venom was Spider-Man.
Yeah, Mac Gorgon actually is. It was really interesting because Mac Gorgon is the original Scorpion, who then later became
really
like a Venom. But the Sentry. Yeah.
Sentry was like the only one who didn't leave the team. He was like, well,
Ares
said he'd help me out a bit. Yeah, Ares, one of the new cards for the season,
and then Marvel Boy. Yeah. The comics were actually great. I recommend reading. Like if you have like Marvel.
Yeah,
Unlimited,
I might check this out. It sounds cool. Like I really like the concept of it. It seemed like a fun concept.
It was the comics were really fun. I bought them like back in the day when it came out. I was reading them every month, and it was a limited run, and it was really good.
Yeah, so that's the season theme. They did a whole, their fun little video. They did like I don't know why they did like a funny Dungeons and Dragons theme for
Weird. I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, it was good though. The dev videos are always funny. Although it is funnier when you go to the comments and like they are for the last like few months, the comments on those videos have been overwhelmingly complaints about the acquisition. It was that's taken over the YouTube comment section, but the cards look cool. We're not going to talk about them all today, but I figured we could talk about the season pass card because it seems pretty strong, and it looks like it and the new card they're releasing on the first week, Victoria Hand, could push forth a rare thing in Snap, a new archetype, which we don't get a whole lot of. And that's focused around the thing that they essentially had to axe Loki for, which is hand generation. It's so Iron Patriot 2/3. He adds a random 4, 5, or 6 cost card to your hand, and if you're winning his location, the turn after you play him. So if you play him on turn 2, if you're winning the location at the end of turn 3, you get a 4 cost reduction to that card.
Man, look at the art on the Iron Patriot. Good grief. You think that's going to get censored in the Chinese version?
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? It is very patriotic. But yeah, the card seems pretty good. I mean, we're in the world where like strong effects on a 2/3 is just like the norm now, and I think this card's gonna see an uptick of like people playing Juggernaut and Hydra Bob and
Right.
some of the Guardians and all that stuff that just helps you get those early points in a lane because the payoff is really big. And I'm curious to see how the variance goes on that because it's a wide pool of cards, 4, 5, and 6, but chopping 4 mana off of a 4 or more cost card is massive. Like that's such a huge thing. I would consider playing this card in a Silver Surfer deck. Just because like Surfer is kind of starved for 2 drops outside of Forage usually, and you could follow up with a tempo Juggernaut or a Brood or something, and then all of a sudden If you get a 4-drop, it's free. If you get a 5-drop, it's 1. You could weave it in on like turn 4. Like it's just this card is going to be, I think, very strong. And the weakness of it, I think, is going to be like how that variance plays out, and then also how many other people are playing it. Because if a lot of other people are playing it, all the decks are going to be like, the mirrors for this are going to be such a nightmare. Because whoever gets Iron Patriot and wins that lane versus who doesn't is going to have such an advantage in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And then the card coming out with it on the first week is Victoria Hand, which goes along very well with it. She's a 2/3 ongoing that gives your cards that were generated to your hand have +2 power. So Iron Patriot's card, Sentinels, Swarms, anything that gets generated to hand, not Arsham cards, but specifically anything that gets generated in your hand is going to have a +2 buff. And so that's got people thinking, all right, well, maybe it's time for the return of like Quinjet and this new Iron Patriot card. And maybe we'll see some cards you haven't seen play in a while, like Snowguard or Sentinel, these hand generation cards that have just not really had any relevancy. So it'd be cool if we saw a bit of a new archetype emerge out of this, because it doesn't happen super often in Snap. And
Yeah.
then like Moonstone, another card coming later in the season, doubles up the ongoing effects of your 3 or less cost cards in that lane. So you could go from +2 to all your generated cards to +4, which is a massive buff. And there are definitely some cool things. I'm a fan of this season. I think this season has quite a few cool designs, and I'm definitely more excited for this month than it's still a ways out. But the February season, aside from the season pass card, there isn't doing it for me very much. Like, I'm much more excited for this season than February.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how this season goes because I have like no keys, so I'm not getting like anything.
So yeah, you're gonna get the true Marble Snap experience that's been driving people away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Yeah, because I'm
I
not gonna
might-
be able to get anything. So
Me neither. I'm like looking at February and like I'm probably not gonna get cards till February.
yeah, probably
Oh,
not.
yeah.
I'm
February is very like bounce centric, it looks like.
Yeah.
But I'm not really into as many of those designs.
I don't like that I have to choose like this though.
it's
That's the
really
problem,
a bummer.
right?
Yeah.
It's like it's that's why it's like, well, we have a new card every week, but the thing is, like, most of your player base isn't interacting with the new card every week. Like, I think, being in like the online community, it looks kind of skewed because obviously all the content creators interact with it. And I think a lot of the people you see in chats and stuff, not that they have them all, but I think they interact with more cards than like the average free to play or pass only player does. Because like I'm interested in pretty much all the cards this month. Like I'm gonna get all the cards
Yeah.
this month. But next month I'm interested in almost none of the cards outside of the season pass. So that month is like going to be kind of boring for me unless something drastically changes. Because we're at a point in Snap where it's like the game is so much more boring if you're not interacting with the new releases. Because that's the only thing to do, right? Like you hit Infinite, you could play some Conquest and go for a border, but if you're not doing those two things, or if you've already done those two things, the only thing new to do is to play with the new card, or maybe hope an OTA changes a card you already own. So the game gets a lot more boring when you can't interact with the cards regularly, and that's the whole acquisition problem, right? That's one of the reasons I think people are moving away from it, is because they're getting bored, and the release cycle is perpetuating that, because they're not having enough exciting new things to toy around with to keep them interested in the game.
Well, as always, a very upbeat note to end on. I think that we'll be back to talk about the new cards and Victoria Hand, and if this new archetype does have legs, because I think that no matter what, regardless of whether I can experience it or not, more archetypes for this game are kind of sorely needed to add some variety, particularly for those that have been engaged with for some time. So I hope it works out, and not at the expense of this kind of balance they've put together.
And hey, we're gonna get 2,000 tokens in the the random slot. So we'll have
That'll
a
make
slightly better card acquisition, even though it's not really
already owned will feel
Right.
like a slightly less hard kick in the groin.
Yeah. It's like they took off the steel-toed boots and now they just have a regular shoe on.
Wow, that's
I even think that's overly kind.
Hey, now instead of having to get already owned 6 times, you can do it for the price of 3. That's 2x value.
oh
They
gosh.
should make it a title.
Yeah, I don't yeah, I have too much to say about that. But I won't, because I'm gonna try and end on a positive note and keep it Cosmo, and hope that we'll have a fun new archetype to talk about when we meet at our next flexibly scheduled podcast drop episode. So probably about 2-3 weeks. If I'm gonna be real.
Yeah, right. Hey, we're consistently
Hey, it'll still be
inconsistent.
more
It's
second
great.
hitter fixes card acquisition, right? Probably.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have our next show before I get my first edition badge on Ghost.
Yeah.
By the time they took so long on it that I'll get my first edition badge on Ghost, even though I got it way after you.
There you go.
Oh,
All right,
God.
guys. Well, thank you for those who are watching us live. We appreciate you being here. If anyone else wants to join our clan, it looks like there are a few spots open. Our alliance, we are a pretty casual alliance, so if you're not, but we are
For the max
active.
rewards, you might not be the most
Yeah.
pleased, but
Yeah, but we are active in terms
Casual.
of we're an active
Okay.
group. We just approach it casually. So if that's of interest to you, you can reach out to us on our Twitter.
Big shout out to Lee Acer for carrying the team time and time again.
Yeah, this week it was Safety Blade. Last most weeks it's Lee. There's always someone who's like carrying it a little bit.
Yeah.
The
But,
rewards have been a little bit better for the personal rewards. The last 2 weeks, it was like a border. This week, it's a variant.
I
So it's
always
not been,
forget
like, the
about it. I need to
garbage.
check it more because I've been playing a little bit more. I'm trying to get golden cards. I got a golden Zabu today, so it's kinda
nice.
Gold
Yeah,
design.
I try to pick up the discard ones whenever I see them. So yeah. All right. Well, so thank you for those watching live, those listening to us on YouTube or through one of the many podcast applications. We appreciate you, and we will catch you next time. And until then, keep it Cosmo, everyone.
Keep it Cosmo.
Keep it Cosmo.
Enough said, bub.